What's up guys, it's your boy, still needs an intro, and today I'm going to show you how to install lowering springs. Now this is going to be kind of a two-in-one video because I've started having a clunk and a squeak in my front end whenever I'm going over bumps and whatnot. So I've narrowed it down to my struts needing to be replaced. So I bought some Performance Bilstein struts in order to replace the OEM ones. And then I bought these Eibach lowering springs probably 2 months ago. So let's get right into it. And we'll start off by taking off the wheels and then jacking the car up in the air. Now just for comparison, here's before and after. Before and the after. And here we have a solid, it's basically a whole hand width. So we'll compare that to what we have after we're done lowering it. Now what we are going to do first, if you take a look at this here, we're going to take this bottom nut off of the upper control arm, which is this part right here, in order to let the rest of the suspension components drop out of the way, so that whenever we take off this bolt right here, everything down here will drop out of the way so that we can pull not only the strut but the spring out all at the same time. And while I'm letting the penetrating fluid work its way into the threads, I actually stand corrected. It is an 18 millimeter nut, not 3/4, because I'm a dumb American and think everything is standard, even though this car was built in Germany by people that are German, not American. 18 mil. Now a neat trick to help you get the upper control arm pushed out is you can actually take the nut that is on the bottom of it, and once you get it unscrewed, you can flip it upside down and screw it back on there. And then once it is flush with the bottom of the threads, you can either take a rubber mallet, a ball peen hammer, or if you're a real savage, you'll just use a claw hammer. But once you get it on there, you'll just give it a couple light taps and it'll knock right out of there. Alright, I have decided that I'm actually going to go ahead and just take off the caliper so that I can also take off the rotor, so that whenever I'm hitting this, I keep nicking the caliper and I don't want to hit the rotor. I want to try and stay away from that as much as possible. So just for safety reasons, I'm going to go ahead and take both of these off, and it should make our process a little bit easier. Plus it'll give us a little more clearance to take out the strut. Now I just took out this bottom bolt right here. You can see it, and it goes all the way through here, and there's a bushing on the inside of this, and this is going to be an 18 millimeter bolt also, same as the one that's up on the upper control arm. Alright, I've got everything unbolted now, everything's loose, and same thing goes for the strut. I got that unbolted, and so the last thing is going to be popping the hood and unbolting the top bolts that are on the strut. And then in order to take some of the load off of the components in here, just so that it wasn't in tension whenever I was trying to take off nuts and bolts and whatnot, I would use the jack, and I pushed up the strut just a little bit in order to release some of it. Now I'm going to try and block the wind as much as possible, but I'm just going to take a flathead screwdriver and pop off these little covers, cover that up, and you'll see you have 3 nuts on top here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take off these back 2 first, so that whenever I go to loosen this one, I can reach down here with my offhand and hold on to the strut just to make sure it doesn't fall or anything. And that wonderful lady right there just gave me this box right here, and if you can read that little sticker right there, that's it's a future video, just to let you know. Got it. Alright, now with the spring compressor kit, this one is called the McPherson strut spring compressor kit. Ugh. You can rent these from your local auto parts store. I prefer O'Reilly's, even though they haven't sponsored me yet. But the way it basically works, you have these two clamps. Alright, I've got the spring compressed almost all the way down. You can see that it's actually separated from the top boot, which means that there's no tension on the top boot. But just to be safe, I'm still going to loosen that up very, very slowly off of the top. I am afraid that that's going to be a little bit of an issue considering this is going straight up and this is up at an angle, but we'll see if there's a way that I can work around that. So in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and loosen that, and then we will take the cap off. All right, we got the nut off, and then this cap comes off like so. Pull the little boot off with it, and this is basically just a dust cover. So here you can see spring. It's all just its own individual piece and whatnot. So now I'm going to go ahead and start loosening these clamps up, and then we will grab the new strut over there and start to put the cap and everything, and then this bottom coupling that this sits against, we'll go ahead and start slapping that on the new one, and then we'll start compressing the new spring. Alright, first things first, you can see the height difference between the two springs. They're both bottomed out at about the same level. Here, you know what, I'll actually even push this one up a little bit. Something like that. And you can see right there is where our height difference is going to be. So this is the Eibach Pro kit. So this is going to be 1 3/4 inches in the front, while the Sport kit is going to be 2 inches in the front. So this is going to be not quite as low as the Sport, but it's still going to give it a very nice stance. And then secondly, when you get a new strut, you get to do the most satisfying thing in the world, and that is cutting this strap right here. So with this new strut inside the box, they give us an instruction manual, bag full of parts, most importantly, the stickers. So what we're going to do, we're going to go and rip this open. We're going to take this bottom part here, with this side facing up towards the top of the strut, put it over like so, and then on the old strut, I have this little rubber, it's kind of a bushing here. I'm going to take that off. Put it over. Make sure it fits down in there nice and snug. Get all the dirt and stuff off, just in case. And then with the new shocks, we're going to put the smaller coil side down on the bottom. There's a little lip where this part is going to go. It sits down in there just right. And then looks like we are going to need to compress this just a little bit. So we'll go ahead and take this top cap off, and then we'll go ahead and get the spring compressors on there. Next, got the spring compressed, and it's on there, sitting in there nicely. It is a little off, but I feel like part of that is just because there's no weight on it, obviously. It's not broken in or anything. So then comes little cap here. This goes down over that. It's just kind of an extra barrier, kind of a protectant, sort of. I'll go over the top of that. And then you get your OEM hat for the coil. It's got this little boot on it. Again, it's just a dust cover basically. And it is kind of a pain to get around the clamps, but once you get it on there, you can just kind of wiggle these back and forth. Just kind of push it on there, whatnot. Okay, and then last but not least, put this little cap here. I'll start to screw that on. I'll suck this down. As always, I apologize for the wind in advance, but first thing that you're going to want to do when you go to install the new strut and spring, you're going to go ahead and get the nuts that go on top of this on the underside of your hood. You want to go ahead and put this under here. You want to line it up with the hole there on top. And when you get that in place, you want to go ahead and fasten the nuts. Just not even hand tight, just get them on there so that whenever you need to move anything, it's already in place. And you can see here that this is angled a little bit, and so I am going to have to turn it, but again, it's going to be easy because everything's already fastened up top. So I can go ahead and grab this and spin it and orient it the way that I need, and then I'll push down on this. Bring this up and over, and then push down on it again. I still need to turn it just a hair, go like that. Push down on it again. And then here's the bolt that goes through the bottom bushing on this side. So we'll go ahead and line that up. We're going to want our brake line pushed up and over, just so that it stops dripping. So we'll go ahead and push down on this. Try and re-line this up. And then if you can, you do want to try and start the thread by hand before you start using a ratchet, just so that you don't try to cross thread it by any means. Alright, and then next is going to be installing this little booger here, and then the upper control arm last. And let me show you a good trick on how to try to avoid alignment as much as possible. Granted, you are still going to need an alignment, but this will just help the process even more. You're actually going to want to take a jack. Sorry about the wind. Take an extra floor jack if you have one, or if you don't have an extra one, make sure your car is secured on jack stands, and then use your normal jack. But we'll go ahead and jack this up, and we want to put it right underneath the suspension so that everything is on a load, essentially how the car would be whenever it's driving. Alright, and then whenever you have the hole lined up, you can go ahead and just slip it through there. You know, lower it down here for this one. And whenever you're connecting this one, it doesn't have to be fully loaded on the suspension, just enough to make sure everything is lined up properly. So we're going to go ahead and start hand tightening it again. And then with this one, there is a 10mm hex head on the end of it. So you're going to want a 10mm socket or a 10mm wrench, so that whenever you go to tighten it, I believe mine is going to be 7/8. Let me double check really quick. Yeah, so mine is 7/8. So what I'm going to do is you're going to make sure that this is on tighten. And then I'm going to put the 7/8 end on there. Then I'm going to go ahead and put the hex head on there. And then I'm going to tighten everything together. Now lastly is going to be the upper control arm, which is this, and it connects to this part here. And it's actually one of the more difficult ones because whenever you go to tighten it, this spins freely because it is separate from this. So how you control that is you take an Allen key and you stick it in there. Mine is going to be a 6mm. And so the way you get around it is while you're tightening it, you can have the Allen key in this way. And when it's in there, you can put the wrench around this end and then tighten the bolt. So let me show you how to put all this together. We're first going to start off by raising the jack up as high as it can go, just to simulate as much load on the suspension as possible. And the reason you know if you've gone too far is because it'll actually start lifting off the jack stand, and we do not want that happening. So, you lift this up as high as it'll go. Got it up all the way. We'll move this to here. We'll go and start to pull this down. And this is going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky. But once you get the nut started on there, once you pull the upper control arm through the hole, everything from there is basically just tightening the nut. So just for the sake of demonstrating, essentially what I did is I put this in here, and then I held it in place like so, and at the same time I used my 18mm wrench and I just tightened it. Next, we're going to take this disgusting looking rotor that was left out overnight, and we're going to go and throw it on here. And just to hold it in place, what I like to do is I like to push it on there as far as it'll go and then spin it and put the bottommost lug nut in place. And the reason I put the bottommost is because you can already tell which angle that it's tilting at. So by putting the bottom one in place, it'll essentially hold it out of the way a little bit anyway. So we'll go ahead and screw that on. Alright, and I went ahead and turned the rotor to the left as far as I could, just to give me a little bit more clearance to work on this back side here as we're putting in the brake components. And you also don't want to forget to tighten these the rest of the way, because that would be a big oopsie. Now last but not least, let's go and put the wheel on. It's a little better. I think once I start driving around and stuff and get the car settled, I think it'll actually lower it a little bit more. But we'll see. Let me get the lug nuts and stuff tightened up. Third time's the charm. Alright, it's been a couple days. We've had a little bit of snowfall in the meantime, but we're gonna go ahead and do the back tires now because I'm free for the day. But you can see here in the front, there is a pretty substantial difference in the gap. So if you take a look at the before and the after, before and after. We've got the back wheels on blocks just to give us a little bit more clearance. We're gonna go ahead and loosen the lug nuts, and then we'll start jacking up the rear end. And the best way that I can see to jack up the rear end is gonna be going underneath here, and you can't put the jack stands underneath this part here because that's gonna be the part that we have to drop down. So what I might do is find another point, probably on the chassis, since this is a unibody, and we'll take a look over on the sides really quick. Before and after. Yeah, so right here is the jacking point, and we'll just go ahead and put the jack stand under there as soon as we jack the car up. Now it is a little bit dark outside, so I've got a light here, I've got another light here, and I've got the light that's on my camera. And so what we're going to start off by doing is, first and foremost, taking the wheel off. Alright, now that I've got the wheel off, I have the jack put underneath of the shock to take off some of the load. Also, so it can absorb the load of the spring, so that whenever we take that out, it won't just come flying out at us. But the first one we're going to remove is this back bolt right here. Alright, now that I've got the rear bolt out there, we are going to go ahead and take out the bolt that is at the bottom of the strut. And we are actually not going to remove this third bolt right here at the front, because we're actually going to use that as a pivot, so that once we undo the strut bolt, we'll be able to just take the whole thing, tilt it down, take the spring, just snake it out the back, and put our new one in. Alright, now that we have everything unbolted, we're going to slowly lower the rear jack. And what it'll do is it will release the tension of the spring, and it'll drop down the back side of the arm. That way we can take the spring out of the back. Just in case you didn't quite understand what I was getting at, right there is a better visual representation of what I was going for. So now, like I was saying, just pick it up as bottom boot here. Maybe it's a little stuck right now. Here's the old spring, and here's the new spring. And you can see they are roughly the same height, give or take. But the biggest thing you can look at is this old spring is 9 coils tall, and the new one is 11 coils tall. Plus you can tell the wire, or the bar that the spring's actually made out of, is significantly thicker on the old one than it is the new one. So this one will retain more weight also while it's lowering the car at the same time. So let's go ahead and install the new one. Now when it comes to installing the rear springs, orientation is not as important as it is on the front. So the only thing you really need to make sure you do, you can opt to clean out some of this dust, but there's a little lip right here in the old boot for it. The same thing up top on this side. But there's a little slot where the rubber comes up and then it goes back over, and that is where you want to put this part of the spring. Now, since this doesn't have the neat little barcode like it does on that one, showing which way is top, the easiest way to tell, look at the logo. The logo is always facing the right way, for the most part. So we're gonna go ahead and slip this down in there, and then I'll show you how to install the new ones. All right, now that we got the wheel on, let's go ahead and pull the jack stands out and let's see how it looks. Right, and we did have to put the old wheels and tires back on it because it did snow, as you saw in the video, and then the back tires actually started to show cords, so we went ahead and just put them away and put the new tires on there. But you can see, compared to the old pictures, the stance of this thing is a lot lower than it was originally, and you can see the wheel gap is almost non-existent now. For example, before, you could put your entire width of your hand in there and your shoe would fit in there perfectly fine. But now, if you go to put your hand in there, it's not even close. It's like basically a hand width away. And I've gone over some pretty gnarly speed bumps at speed, going probably 15, 20 miles an hour just to see if I could get it to rub. And it still didn't, and I feel like a lot of that is because of how much stiffer the whole suspension setup is now. And then if we take a look at the back, the gap is even more noticeable for how much lower it is now compared to the old pictures. But I will say, even with it being lowered and everything, the ground clearance is still plenty. And unless a driveway is at like a 40-degree angle for some reason, I should be able to clear most entries and exits. And the more stuff that I do to this, I just can't get over how happy this car makes me. Now, if you found this video helpful, or at least entertaining, please be sure to drop a like and share it with your friends. If you'd consider subscribing, click over here. If you want to see what YouTube recommends you watch next, click over here. And as always, I look forward to seeing you guys next time.